Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switson, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? Welcome to this segment of the Woman's Connection. Our guest is Andrea Nierenberg, a business consultant and motivational speaker. And she's going to tell us how we can motivate ourselves. So I'd like to welcome Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you. How can one motivate themselves?
Okay, well, again, it goes back to being motivated. You have to, it's like the word motivation is go into motion. So a lot of times people will say, well, motivate me. And in reality, we have to be the ones to motivate ourselves. So it starts with actually believing in what you want, believing in a situation, and actually putting some action with it. So for example, you know how people say, oh, I can't get started on this project, or I don't want to clean my apartment, and all of a sudden they do one thing. They start, and then it's like all of a sudden you want to get into doing the rest because
it's a chain reaction.
It's a chain reaction. All of a sudden you just keep going. And when we depend on other people to motivate us, which they can't, it never works. We can get inspired by others, but the true impetus of motivation is within.
So when you, like you just said, nobody else can motivate you. They can inspire you.
Exactly.
All right. In your tapes, just for women, you say we should consider ourselves a product.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So we are our product to motivate ourselves to do whatever we think we should be doing.
Well, I use this metaphor or line. I say that in the grocery store of life,
okay,
why would somebody pick you up off the shelf? Are you new and improved? Are you repackaged? What are you doing to really sell yourself, if you will? You know, whether it's interpersonally or for a job or whatever it is. So what are you doing to get that competitive edge? And everybody wants the magic formula to do it for them, when the reality is that you can read every book on self-help or listen to every tape or go to every course, and unless you take some action and do something, nothing happens.
You're defeating yourself.
Without a doubt. And that's it's almost like, okay, I'll buy all these books, but then I'll just listen to them. But if you just listen to them or read them and you don't do anything, nothing happens. You learn, but action is the key word.
All right, let's just say you've been down.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So what else is new?
Right.
But I mean, we've been down. We know something disturbed us to drag us down.
Mm-hmm.
How do we motivate ourselves to get out of that?
Okay, it goes back to attitude.
All right.
And, we all go through times where, we feel sorry for ourselves or we're down and out about something. And I specifically went through something like that when I was in a bad car accident 12 years ago, because all of a sudden 38 broken bones. And
Ooh.
You're laying there in a hospital bed, and the most obvious thing is to feel sorry for yourself. So you have a choice. You can either kind of be there, or you can actually think about, what can I do to make myself feel better? It's really a mind game, again, and yet the reality is to put some action behind that, because there's always somebody, when we're down, that's got things worse in life than we do.
Going into a work situation where we can be pretty disturbed and pretty down about, let's take one specific topic, sexual harassment.
Right.
That can be pretty self-degrading.
Exactly.
Because you don't know what you're doing to cause it, and you could be very innocent about the whole situation, just being you as a human being. How do you handle a situation without escalating the situation, or just how do you handle it?
Okay. Well, first of all, realize that you're not giving off any types of signals that could be misconstrued in anything, because today you have to be so careful.
Right.
And like you said, you're just being you, but just being you sometimes. I mean, a lot of what I deal with now are holiday parties and people becoming a little too friendly or things like that, and people, I'm just being friendly. But it can be misconstrued and things like that. However, if you are being taken advantage of, and you have to have the guts and the assertiveness to report it. And if you can't report it within your company because of politics or whatever,
which is many times the case,
which is very true, then go find yourself an attorney or some professional that you can actually speak to and take other steps. Otherwise, you become the victim, and that's the most demotivating thing that one can do. You lose your self-esteem, and you only plunge deeper, and you think you deserve the type of treatment that you're getting.
And that's not true.
No, but a lot of people go through that.
Would you say it's wise for people to document exactly what's going on?
Without a doubt. Everything. Everything that goes on. And I would not say go in and tape record, because again, that could be construed as illegal. But document, keep a paper trail, things like that that go on. And if you can get witnesses around you when something, I know that for a case that happened with a woman who was fairly high up in a corporation, and she actually she knew what to expect because she had been in the situation before where she was being taken advantage of, and she set it up so that somebody else walked in and was able to actually see.
Well, if she was setting it up, wouldn't that be construed as entrapment?
In a way, it might be thought of that way. However, she'd gone through so many of these problem situations and had been afraid because that nobody in the corporation would believe it. So what she did is what any, assertive, smart person would do. She was surviving. So she
motivated herself and motivated the situation
Absolutely.
Right out of the
Because
existence.
we as women tend to go talk to other women, and we just talk and analyze. We should take a lesson from our male counterparts and look for results. So how do we want to get to the end result on something like this? So she brought somebody else in who just happened to witness.
Very clever. Very clever. Good timing. How would somebody motivate themselves in a job situation where they are getting top dollar, basically the top dollar that they can get at the plateau that they're at? They really don't want to take any more responsibility on because they don't want it, and they know it's almost a dead end. How can they motivate themselves in realizing different perks and making themselves feel having a lot of self-worth in their job? Okay, well, if they've gotten the highest amount of money that they're going to get and they don't want to take on any more responsibility, find ways to even get better at what you're doing. Seek out other challenges, if you will. Maybe get involved on a task force, or give an opportunity to speak or to develop some of your contacts in some ways. But do something so that you feel like that you're being useful and that you're contributing all the time. Fear holds us back. Yes. And that's the most degrading, I don't know if that's the right word, self-defeating? It's a self-defeating. Okay. How does a woman work through fear, whereas a man doesn't seem to know any fear? Well, that's a perception. All right. Okay, because I think that plenty of men have fear. They just do a good job of maybe not showing it as outwardly as we do. And fear, I use another acronym on that. Fear is false expectations appearing real. So sometimes we put it in our head that something's not going to go right, or we're not going to handle this situation. And again, that's what happens. Whereas a lot of times, as you said, a man doesn't show that. And what they do, they have just been able to, as you know, little boys never cry, or they're men. So we need to take a lesson in that respect and to just be able to realize we can take on any situation. And I always look to a higher power a lot of times and say, I'll get through this. I do. That's a good way. I always do. I've had plenty of them. And I actually follow my advice on all this because I have a situation just coming up where at first I thought, oh my God, what if this goes? And then I thought, you know what? It's not going to go wrong. It'll be fine. It'll all work out. Yeah, and it will. It goes back to believing in yourself. Absolutely. Believe in yourself. Recognize your self-worth. You know, if I ask people to write down a list of what they like about themselves and what they don't like about themselves, which list do you think is easier to write? Oh, the negatives, of course. Of course. On the other hand, I always say, write that positive one and then put it up somewhere where you can see it every day, like in the bathroom or something, where you actually, and believe it, affirm yourself. Say, I'm positive, I'm good at this, I'm willing to try that. Now, aren't all these self-motivation things touchy-feely, good kind of fluff?
It's interesting because they really aren't. I always say that they're the soft skills that impact the bottom line, because these are the things that really develop you and make you who you are. And I don't think there's anything soft about or touchy-feely about recognizing who you really are and believing in yourself and developing your self-esteem. Because if you can't do that, you can't go in and, negotiate a $1 million deal or anything like that, because you just don't have the guts, if you will, to do it. So they both work hand in hand.
You've got two acronyms that were on your tape.
Yes.
One was WIIFM, What's in It for Me. What's that all about?
That's the radio station that's playing in everyone's head all day long, all night long. WIIFM, what's in it for me? Why should I listen to you? Why should I be here? What am I going to get out of this situation? The other radio station
is MMFI AM.
Yes.
Ah, okay. Now I got it. All right. Make me feel important about me?
Exactly. It's make me feel important about me, the other person. How do I make the other person feel important about themselves? What do I do to make you feel good about yourself? And use persuasion skills or motivational skills.
So by doing that, you actually come out a winner, more so than saying, okay, it's all about me, but it's not about me, it's about you, and therefore you're thinking about me in a wonderful light.
Absolutely.
So I'm a winner.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If people feel good around you when they've walked away, it's kind of contagious, and you feel good. I mean, it's like they say, enthusiasm is contagious.
And there's not enough.
However, I will go on record to say it's got to be sincere. People can see through fluff or false fakeness, all that, very, very, very obvious. So you got to be sincere. Really become interested in other people, but realize that, see, the AM and the FM stations are very interesting if we always realize that they're playing.
And the AM is the positive one, and the FM is the negative one.
Well, it's not negative, and because the thing is, what's in it for me is really, when you think about it, time is a commodity, and when you sit in on a meeting or a lecture, what's in it for you? Why should you be there? Why should we even be having this talk? So it's like we're always thinking about that because time is important. So it's not that it's a negative, but if we realize that's what we're all, number one.
And guess what? Time is up.
I figured.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you,
Andrea.
Barrie.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. With me today is Mary Ellen Spiegel, certified financial planner and founder of Fiscal Plus. We're going to talk about mutual funds and how to make money. Welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks, Barrie. It's very nice to be here.
Tell us about mutual funds and what we should look for when we're going to select one.
Well, first of all, people should be aware that today there are over 8,000 mutual funds.
8,000?
8,000. So you can appreciate, if you're looking for your first mutual fund, that it could be pretty much daunting to try to determine which fund you should invest in.
You're not kidding.
But I would start with having some idea of the type of mutual fund that you'd like to go into, whether it's a growth mutual fund or a tax-exempt fund or a value-oriented fund or what they call a sector fund. Once you know what type, then you really want to begin to eliminate the funds within that category to choose the ones that would be best for your objectives.
Okay, well, let's start. How do you know which fund you want to go into? How do you know you want growth? How do you know you want tax exempt? I mean, you're just starting out. How do you know?
Well, generally, you'd have some idea in regards to when you're going to need the money.
Okay.
For example, if you're going to need the money in the next 2 years, let's say, you wouldn't want to put your money into a growth fund per se, because a growth fund may not perform consistently well in that short period of time. A growth fund is more for someone who's thinking they have more to a 4 to 5 to 10 year time frame of when they will actually be tapping the money. A tax-exempt fund, if you happen to be in a high tax bracket and you don't own your apartment, you have no write-offs, so when you pay your taxes each year, you're paying a large percentage to the government, then you'd be
God forbid.
Right, God forbid, right. But then you'd be in a position where you'd look for a fund where you're not going to pay taxes on the interest and the gains within that fund. And these funds are readily identified within the pages of the financial section of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, any of the popular money investment magazines like Money or Smart Money. They'll break them out by category. So that
makes it helpful.
Right, somewhat so.
Okay, once you've decided which category you're in, what's your next step?
The next step is to make sure that you're buying a fund that has a track record behind it. Many times when we open up the Times or the Journal, you'll see these wonderful ads and they'll say XYZ fund up 70% and buy now. And if you don't have a...
The train's leaving.
The train is leaving, buy this fund. And if you don't have an appreciation for the fact that there are many security rules and regulations for a company, what they can say in print, but they don't necessarily have to tell you when this fund began. So if it's very easy for a new fund, if you just started the fund, to be up 70% in its first year. But you wouldn't necessarily want to invest in that fund. You'd want to wait to see and give it at least a 5-year performance track record behind it. So a good way of eliminating a lot of those funds that are in the pages of the papers, the 8,000 funds, is to look for any fund that's been in existence for at least 5 years.
5 years to develop a track record.
A track record behind it.
Okay.
And then you want to look at, when you go back to, say, the growth category or tax-exempt funds, you'll want to look to see in that category, where does your fund rank? Is it in the top 20 percentile or is it in the lower bottom percentile? Naturally, you're going to draw yourself to the funds that are in the top 20% percentile.
Right.
So that would be the second area that I would say would be terribly important, is to make sure that the fund has a track record behind it.
Okay. Then after that, what do you do?
Then you want to look at who is managing the money.
All right.
You know, a mutual fund is not something that's run by a computer unless it's an index fund, which is a whole other matter. They're all run by people. And the managers within the fund are the ones who really are responsible for its track record. So sometimes a fund will have an excellent track record, and then all of a sudden the fund will go down dramatically, or maybe it will go up some more. Many times that's a function of the fact that they have changed fund managers. So when you look at your fund, say you have a fund that's been in existence for 5 years, and maybe there's 3 of these funds that have all performed identically, they're all in a good percentile, and when you look at the manager history, though, you'll see that one fund may have had 4 managers. Maybe they've had practically a different manager every year, while another fund has had a manager for 4 to 5 years. You'd also, so there you would choose the one with the person that has been there the longest, of course.
Sounds more like a stable fund versus one who's switching out constantly.
That's right. That's right. So that's terribly important.
Then what do you do? Okay, I've got ABC Corp. It's AAA rating. The manager's been there for 5 years. Then what?
Then the next thing is the cost of the fund.
Okay.
There are, you've probably heard, there are funds that are no-load funds and load funds.
All right.
So a load fund means that you actually pay a sales charge, an additional percentage. It could be anywhere up to 8%.
That's a lot.
Which is a lot. Or it could be maybe around 3%. On average, most of them today are between 3 and 5 3/4% is the sales charge on a load fund, which means that off the top, if you have $1,000, they would automatically take a 3% off of that as a sales charge, just for the privilege of writing your check to that particular mutual fund company.
Isn't that exciting?
It's very exciting. Yeah, it's very exciting. And I must tell you that throughout time, there's really been, and certainly the mutual fund companies will debate this, but there is no correlation between paying the sales charge and being guaranteed that you're going to have a higher performance. So it makes sense then, if you're going to buy a fund, you're doing this on your own, you're not working with a financial advisor who may be getting paid that way. That's a different story. But if you're doing it on your own, you should certainly be drawn to the no-load funds.
Okay, so in some, is there one more point? Okay,
no. Well, there's the after the no-load funds.
Right.
We then, I should have said yes. Actually, we then want to look at, there are additional fees, or what they call management fees.
Right.
And 12B fees.
That's the killer. Okay.
That's the killer, right? That's really for advertising expense fees. So you want to then look at what those fees are. So you have your load fee, number one,
Right.
and then underneath that, there are these administrative fees and the 12B fees, and those should be looked at as well. All
Wow.
of those fees are found in the prospectus.
Okay, and you can get the 800 number in the papers,
In
in the
papers.
financial statements, and look at them over.
And you can call, you can do all this from your home anytime. Usually the 1-800 numbers are 24 hours a day, so you can do it in your leisure. Ring them up, ask them for a prospectus to be mailed to you, and you can find all this information in the prospectus.
Wow, this is fascinating. That's just to start looking at. Just to start. So I thank you, Mary Ellen. I hate to tell you, but our time is up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barry.
And thank you so much for joining us. I hope this financial segment has been a help to you, too. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome to this segment of the Women's Connection. With me is Marion Gold, a writer and publicity specialist. And Marion, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You wrote a book about women in the law enforcement profession, better known as police women. How did you ever come to write this book?
Oh, well, I had been doing a lot of talks for the Governor's Division for Women in Arizona on women in non-traditional employment because I had published a lot of articles that have to do with diversity in the workforce and women in the workforce. And in working with a community service organization called Seroptimus International of Phoenix, two of the women I worked with were law enforcement officers.
Oh, interesting.
And a friend of mine said, you know, you write about diversity and you're working with women in law enforcement, why don't you write a book about women in law enforcement? I thought, hey, that's a great idea, I like that. So I started interviewing women around the country about law enforcement and ended up profiling 13 women who came from very diverse backgrounds to become police officers, which is now how they like to be known, as police officers who happen to be women. So that's how I got to writing Top Cops.
That's terrific, because it's very interesting. I mean, out of all the women that you interviewed, what was the most compelling reason for a woman to go into the law enforcement or become a policewoman?
Become a policewoman. Community service, which I found very interesting, given that's how I met the first two women that I ever really knew personally in law enforcement. I found that they had an overriding desire to make their communities better, and they felt they could do it, and the best way they could do it was within the law enforcement community, despite the fact that there were going to be a lot of hurdles to cross over.
Wow, and they're growing by leaps and bounds because they see more women.
We do. I'm sorry. I get so excited about this. There's, out of about 700,000 law enforcement officers in the country, only 13.8% are women. Less than 3% are in top command positions, and even less are minority, women who come from women of color.
Wow.
So they are starting to make some inroads, and we are seeing them more, but in the command positions where they can really make a difference in how law enforcement is practiced, it's a little slower going, which is kind of frustrating.
Yes, because I know you had a hand in this book that Penny Harrington wrote,
Yes.
Triumph of Spirit, and it was one woman's odyssey through the law enforcement world.
Yes, I had interviewed Penny for Top Cops and then found out that she had wanted to write her memoirs.
Is that how it came about?
That is how that came about. Penny Harrington was the first woman to be named chief of police in a major metropolitan police force, which was Portland, Oregon, in 1985. And her book, Triumph of Spirit, is fascinating. I mean, I was able to give a snapshot of what it was like for her. But in her own book, she is really able to tell the full story about some of the really very important changes that she made for women in policing because of the number of civil rights suits that she actually ended up filing and winning.
She filed on behalf of herself? Or
on behalf of herself, and I believe that one of them was more, I guess you would call it a class action suit. It had to do with height requirements within policing. So between Top Cops and Triumph of Spirit, no, I'm really happy to say that both of these books are being very well received in the law enforcement community. I am continuing on that track with another book that has to do with marketing in law enforcement. And Penny is the director of the National Center for Women in Policing in Los Angeles. So we're both trying to get the word out there that this is a good profession for women who are qualified and that women can achieve top command positions. It's not easy, but they can do it.
But no job in the working world is easy to begin with, and
That's right.
climbing the corporate ladder anyway is difficult.
It's true. I was actually astounded at the similarities in the kinds of things that the women in policing were facing compared to what I faced, for example, in corporate America. It's a very difficult climb. But the difference is, I mean, the worst that could happen to me is the men who worked with me weren't going to like me. Maybe I would lose my job. Maybe I wouldn't get a promotion. I didn't have to worry about calling for backup and no one being there.
Oh,
and so for women in policing, the retaliation is far more serious. And you asked about the commonalities of these women, their dedication to service, but these women have guts. I have so much respect for them. They really stuck to. They knew that they could make law enforcement better, and they were not going to let anyone stand in their way, and they were going to do their jobs and do it well, and they succeeded. That's why the subhead on the book is Leading, Succeeding, and Mentoring. All of the women also are very, very dedicated to mentoring other women.
I wish we had a woman, a police officer on the show today, but that's all right, because Penny is, I mean, I read her book, and it was terrific, and your book was absolutely fabulous. Was reading about the different women across the country and how they got into the business.
And there's a woman with the New York State Police that's
yes,
in the
I
book,
noticed.
Robin Benziger. Yes, oh, she's just done a wonderful job. I mean, she's really not only a fine example from the New York State Police, but a fine example for women all over the country, and very much involved in mentoring.
I remember one time I was down in San Antonio, and I was staying in this hotel, and we came back one night from sightseeing, and there were all these police women around. It was a riot because it was in the mid-'80s, I would say, and it was, you didn't see very many police women at that point in time, and it was like, I think every one of them was in this hotel, and they were all in their blues, and it was really very impressive.
It makes me feel safer. I don't know how you feel about that, but even, well, as a little girl, there were so few of them. You never saw them in uniform, and as I got older, if I saw a cop on the street and it was a woman, I had a sense of pride, and I had a different sense of safety. And I mean, I have the utmost respect for law enforcement officers. I mean, male or female, when they go out there and they put that uniform on, I mean, they're there for me, and I personally feel that and am very supportive of that. But seeing a woman made me feel just a little bit different. There was a...
Mothering?
I don't know. Maybe that was it. Maybe I felt like, maybe it is, you know, the protector attitude. I'm not sure. But I'm just really glad to see it happening, and they just deserve to be lauded. They really do.
Another barrier broken.
Yeah. Still a ways to go, but yeah, another barrier broken.
Well, Marion, thank you so much
for
talking about Top Cop.
I appreciate it.
It was wonderful, and look forward to having you on the show again.
I look forward to that.
And let's hear about your different career that you've taken. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.